also an author at VLF. He has written a book, Truck Day India, which is a memoir of his 10,000 kilometer journey across the India in a truck. Hitchhiking in a truck, sorry. He is also a photographer and has won the Pole Star Award. Our author for today is Mr. Chinmay Tumbe. He is a published researcher and a faculty member at IIM Ahmedabad and a Harvard visiting scholar. His book, India Moving, is a first of its kind endeavor to understand how millions of people have moved from, to, and within India. We'll begin the session now. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here. It is my great pleasure to be moderating this session with Chinmay Tumbe, the author of the wonderfully informative India Moving. I am sure this session is going to be of great value to you guys, and I hope you enjoy it. So with that, I'll start off. So Chinmay, the characterization of India has often been that of a country with low spatial mobility. So I want to understand what is the reality, and across history, what are the various reasons Indians travelled, moved around, and why is the fact that it's not really a country of low spatial?
This is one of the big mistakes when you think of Indian society. There's one view that Indians, you die in the village that you are born. This is such a strong sentiment which is there. But the first fact is that more than half the population, about half the population is women. They do not die in the village they are born. So most adult women in India are migrants. Virtually every adult woman in India is a migrant. And so if you look at the census numbers, there are over 300 million women in India who are considered as migrants. So that's the most important migration stream in India in terms of volume and history, because since at least more than 2000 years we've had this very strong social rule that you have to leave your village upon marriage. Right now you might think that marriage happens everywhere in the world, but Indian village exogamy is very strong, and it varies. In Tamil Nadu, for example, a lot of marriages within the village itself, so you don't move out of the village boundary. But in India, this is a very strong rule. And it's not just about the next village, it's often at a considerable distance. And because of India's unique sex ratio statistics, so this idea of female deficit, for example, in Haryana and Punjab, which is not a new thing, it's been happening for a long time. It has been pulling in women in terms of bridal migration for literally hundreds of years. So there's one classic migration wave in India is of women moving for marriage from Bengal, Bihar towards Haryana, Punjab. And this has been happening for centuries. Right? So the first picture I want to give you is that most women in India are migrants. They are moving for marriage and work. Though the census has a questionnaire saying, state the reasons for migration. So you take marriage, but often you're working after marriage as well. So you're not putting work as your first reason, but it's often marriage. So that's the biggest, 300 million women. Then we say about 100 million Indians are on the move right now for work internally. We're saying about 20 million people are outside India for work. And we're saying, stats differ, but at least in terms of legal immigrants in India, numbers, the census number is about 3 million. So that's the brief picture of migration. And that no way connotes the idea that India is not a country on the move.
In the medieval era and from the ancient era, we saw that merchants were one of the most predominant migrants who moved around transnationally as well as within the country for various business reasons. So could you throw light on that? For example, the communities like Khatris, Parsis, Chettiars.
Yeah, one of the questions I get is, you're a faculty member at IIM Ahmedabad. How dare you study migration? You have better topics to study on. And this is my classic point to tell people, you cannot understand Indian business without understanding migration, especially of the migration histories of our famous merchant communities like the Marwadis, Gujaratis, Sindhis, Punjabis, Chettiars. Kutchis, and a couple of one or two more. You also have the Scottish who came in the 18th century, or the Baghdadi Jews, for example. These 5 communities, which I first mentioned out, even today, if you look at the 10,000 top directors of India, 1,000 largest companies of India, each company has got 10 directors, 10,000 leading corporate directors of India. 50% of them come from these communities, which comprise less than 3% of India's population. Right? If you look at India's 100 richest business leaders, 70 of them come from this community. And it's an absolutely fascinating story as to how the Marwadis, for example, have moved across India, across the world. And a lot of these migrations start in huge numbers in roughly the 17th century. So they're moving with the Mughals, they are financing a lot of trading activities, wars. In the 18th century, for example, the previous session was in the 18th century, merchants become very powerful. Like I say in the book, the Marwadis, for example, are instrumental in getting the British into India, because the House of Jagat Seth sort of finances the Battle of Plassey, and equally instrumental in throwing the British out of India, because the Marwadis, like the Billas and the Bajajs, financed Gandhi and the freedom movement. So a huge role to play in Maharashtra, for example, since we are in Nagpur. If you look at the Marwadi community in particular, there are more Marwadis in northern Maharashtra, for example, than in Bombay and Calcutta combined. This is a fact, unknown fact about business migrations. And in the Maharashtra community, Marathi-speaking community, often there's a slight notion of outsiders, right? These are people coming from outside, they're doing business. These communities have often faced persecution, jealousy, variety of feelings wherever they've gone. The Chettiars in Burma, or Marwadis in Maharashtra, and so on. I'll give you this example. In 1844, the Times of India had a Times of India newspaper. In 1844, not called Times of India then, but they had an article saying, "Beware of the Marwadi." Yeah, this is 1844. And of course, 100 years later, the newspaper is owned by a Marwadi firm. This complete sea change which happens. But there are a lot of laws which come about to hold land against the business class and so on. On hindsight now, we can say that actually what these communities have provided is tremendous skills, capital, credit, trade, and overall contributed towards economic development. And in regions where they have actually left, those economies have collapsed, like much of eastern India. In East Africa, Idi Amin, kicked out the Gujarati traders. Today they are moving them back, saying, "Sorry, we made a mistake, please come back." So huge significance of understanding business in India. You cannot understand business in India without understanding the migration of these particular communities that have happened over the last 300 years.
And this phenomenon that we see also runs counter to the traditional conception in Hinduism that traveling overseas is a taboo. And so we see there are lots of Hindus who are actually traveling a lot, and not just within India. They're going to Central Asia, they're going to West Asia. So you also write in the book about how other religions like Zoroastrianism and Sikhism evolved as a way to facilitate this transnational movement. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. How does one see religion and migration? Are there certain social norms which constrain migration? Now we know, of course, in classical Orthodox Hindu philosophies, for a long time, there is no clear starting date, there's been this notion of the Kala Pani. Right? And so people, if you cross the 7 seas, you lose your caste upon return. There's a strong social sanction. And as a result, a lot of people are scared to venture out. That's one simple reason why Indians didn't reach South America before the British did and so on. There's this cultural taboo. Some of the first people who did start to move out were precisely those who were outside the orthodoxy. So if you look at the birth of Sikhism as a religion, it's very closely tied with the merchant migrations of the Khatris, Punjabi Khatris. In fact, most of the Guru Nanaks are basically Khatris. So there's a patronage saying that the religion allows you to migrate, it allows you to do business, and hence there's a very close synergy between the business person, the migrant, and the religion. Similarly, with a particular strand of Vaishnavism, which comes about in the 17th century, called Pushtimargi Vaishnavism. And as a result of it, the Gujaratis can now go to East Africa in larger numbers than earlier. So you have this religion reform happening in a particular time period, which starts enabling a lot of communities to start moving out in larger numbers. That's why we say that while India has always been on the move, some communities Burmese have been on the move much before, but the starting point has been much earlier because of these religious sanctions.
Apart from merchants, we like to think that slavery was something that existed in North America. India never had any slavery, but slavery has had a long history in India, and it's also tied up in very interesting ways to migration. So, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I teach a course on history at Ahmedabad, and students are always amazed to find that India had a very vibrant slave trade. In the Deccan, you have characters like Malik Ambar, who's born in Ethiopia, who comes to the Deccan, rise. Also, what's interesting is in Indian slave history, also a lot of chances of upward mobility. So you come as a slave, but you end up, fairly rich. That possibility, I would argue, has been much more Indian history rather than American history. Slavery you can see many times, many sort of types. It's even mentioned in the Arthashastra. Some classic examples include the slave dynasties of the Delhi Sultanates and so on. But when you come to this 18th century, sort of 17th, 18th century more, it's interesting because a lot of the slaves are being taken from Africa and being transported to India. There have been also cases where Indians have been taken to Central Asia as slaves. As per one account, the word Hindu Kush, the Hindu Kush mountain range, is said to be the killer of Hindus, right? The slayer of Hindus, because of the harsh, cold winter mountains as these people were being transported. So all kinds of people have been taken as slaves. From this part of what we call the Arakan, this Rohingya crisis right now. In the 17th century, this was an important slave raiding zone. So these are Bengali people being taken as slaves by the Burmese kingdom to be sold to the Portuguese who are running an empire in Southeast Asia. So, remarkable histories of slaving, and the legacy is interesting because, for example, the Siddhi community still exists in India today. Siddhi community is, African by ethnicity, descendants of these guys who came in this 17th century. Still, I think about 50,000 to 100,000 of them live in India today. And if you look at the past patronages, there's a lovely mosque screen in Ahmedabad called the Siddhi Said Jali. If you ever come to Ahmedabad, you'll see this mosque screen. And it happens to be the logo of IIM Ahmedabad. Right? And so this is a remarkable way of that legacy of slavery is the logo of my institution today. So when I tell students this, that IIM is very similar because like Manikambar, you come poor and then you go very rich. Right? But they tell me that no, it's very different because Manikambar, he was a slave and then he became free. Whereas we become free and then after placement, we are in corporate slavery.
So, slavery was abolished by the British in 1834 or so, and then a new form of slavery started taking root, especially in India, which was indentured labor, where the Britishers transported vast number of Indians, especially from Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, those areas, to their various plantations, so they could work there as cheap labor. So, what I'm curious about is what kind of social and cultural evolution did these people who underwent this huge displacement, what sort of cultural evolution did they undergo in various places?
Very good question. It differs substantially. So what he's talking about is this mass recruitment that started in the 1830s, Indian labor, mainly from Bhojpuri speaking, Eastern UP, Western Bihar. The first guys from Mauritius also came from Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand. But the major labor recruitment belts was, the Indo-Gangetic belt and some parts of the Madras Presidency. Now these guys were taken all over the world, right? So they were taken to South Africa, to Mauritius, to the Caribbean, to Fiji, and in different places they had different treatment. So some places like Mauritius, which is a very rich country now, they lead. I mean, Bhojpuri is still spoken in Mauritius. Virtually every head of Mauritius, when they come to India, they have to make a pilgrimage visit to Bihar because they all trace their ancestry out there. So there's this huge sense of upwardability. We say caste has dissolved in many of these places because you've been outside India for more than 150 years. So ethnicity or skin color is now a larger marker of identity vis-a-vis other people rather than caste. But I'll just talk a little bit about Fiji, which I think is a very interesting country. They were called Girmit. So Girmit is the word for indentured contract and so on. And they would go. And it's interesting because they were people who were taken across castes, and the minute they would sit on the ship, their identity would be they would call themselves the Jahaji Bhais. Right? So Jahaji Bhai. And it was literally like caste would dissolve the minute they would get onto the ship. They would all be pretty much one, they would work on these sugar plantations and eventually rise up. Now in Fiji it's interesting because the native population out there, not British, but the native population out there, has been at continuous loggerheads with Indians. So there's like three-fold society. The white sort of European and their descendants, the Indians, that is us, and then the sort of native. And this sort of conflict has happened there for a long time, and as a result, Indians have also been thrown out in recent times. So Fiji, you'd say that Indians have done well, but they're still not, they've not still been accepted out there. Whereas many parts of the Caribbean, in Africa, Indians have been accepted arguably better. But interestingly, in most places, I would say, caste, which is such a strong social institution, tends to dissolve over the past 150 years.
So while the colonial era in India meant these huge transnational migrations for some people, at the same time it sought to impose settled life on the various internal migrants in India, the various nomadic communities like the Banjaras. So what kind of impact did it have, and how did they enforce this sort of settled life on traditional nomadic communities?
Yeah, the impact was very clear. It was negative. It impoverished communities. I mean, if you ask me, what is the British impact on migration? At one level, they increased it tremendously. Like they took these people from Bihar and put them in Mauritius and Fiji and so on. So we would say that the British increased migration tremendously. And in fact, many people think that that was a bad thing. I in fact argue that was a good thing. Because when you actually see the history of those migrations, those people actually came up. Most of them actually went on their own choice. A lot of them went precisely to break away from the caste system. It is ironically the internal migration, some of it which actually stopped. And that was a negative aspect. So what are we talking about? We're talking about people like the Banjaras. Right? So these are traditionally nomadic groups who for centuries have supplied India's logistics sector. Right? So he's written a fantastic book on truck drivers. Before the truck drivers in India, it was all about the Banjaras supplying logistic support across the country. Now the British come and they can't handle mobility because they have to have a particular population under control. Why? Because you need to be able to assess the population to collect land revenue. So if you don't have a fixed residence, how do you collect land revenue from that community? Right? So there's a surveillance state which is imposed. There's also technological improvement. Railways displaces a lot of this, roadbound traffic. So there's a lot of technology-led displacement. So we say that the British rule on traditionally nomadic migrant groups was adverse, and a lot of them lost out. A lot of these communities till date have been impoverished. And what's remarkable is that many of the descendants of those communities now, somewhat funnily, work on the railways, but as porters. Right? So they've been displaced by a technology, and they now work on the platform of that technology.
And along with railways, even the postal money order played a huge role in encouraging remittances, so that migrants in different areas. That's a very interesting thing that I found. So these I think replaced the traditional remittances like hundi system, right, which we had in the medieval era.
The hundi is mainly used by merchants, very rarely by laborers. What I've argued in my book is that more than the Indian railways, it is the Indian post office which has been the most important institution for migrant workers. And the most important financial instrument has been the postal money order. I don't know how many of you ever sent a postal money order in your life. Some of you on the older side have definitely. It was a very thriving market until 10 years back. Now the market has been completely wiped out. But until 10 years back, until 2008, when I was doing my PhD work on this, it was still a vibrant field. It was launched in 1880, and when it was launched, it just caught fire because it was capturing such an important market need. And you had people, the New York Times, commenting on this, in a newspaper article in the 1890s, saying that a sepoy on service, a schoolie labor, all of them have unique trust in the post office because it's as if their monthly wages are being delivered thousands of kilometers away, very securely and safely. I know these are mostly illiterate guys who can't read or write, but have this phenomenal faith in the postal system that their savings will be transmitted back home. And remarkably, many districts of India from the late 19th century start becoming what we now call as money order economies. Right? And so you have districts like Saran in Bihar, you have a district like Ratnagiri, for example, right? Which is completely based on money orders. Now what's interesting is, the Indian Post Office is the only post office in the world which made it home delivery of cash. I don't know if you remember how money orders work. You would get cash at home, right? The postman would come at home and give you cash. That happens nowhere. Think of Western Union. Western Union also, you go to the office and collect your cash. Now, why did they do this? When they started in the 1880s, they very quickly realized that they were cultural taboos. So, firstly, most of the migrant workers were men. So, the recipients were women. Right? So, they were not going to go to the post office to collect cash. So, they changed the system in 1884 and say, well, let's make the postman, go to the house and give the cash. And it's a system which stayed on until very recent. So, the post office had to make a lot of innovations to take into account these unique sort of migration stories that were happening. And what happened was 100 years of mass male migration, which I have argued in the book, still continues today.
And the postman also found himself in a unique position of power, which led to some corruption and bribery as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the postman starts becoming a figure in novels and poems, saying that one is the classic, postman chittiya and, all the celebrations around that, but it's also about the money order bag, and then the person will remove the bag, everyone will look at this person, removing cash. So the postman becomes a caricature in literature because of the money order. I mean, I remember I had sent a money order to my mother, which I've written in my book, and it reached my grandmother's house. It just so happened it was a neighboring house, right? But that's the kind of calculation the postman does on its own, right? I mean, on his or her own. That is, this is the same family, so maybe I will, give it to the other side. But the larger point being this unique trust, right? And this, I've calculated the remittance to GDP ratio was 2 to 3% in the early 20th century. This is just domestic remittance to GDP ratio. It was higher in the early 20th century than it is today, right? And the post office was, the unique way this was happening. I mean, just to give you an example, in the Bombay cotton textile industry, I'm sure it must have happened in Nagpur as well. They started installing money order outlets on the mill premises itself. Why? Because these workers would basically otherwise have to go outside the mill every day to remit the money, and they would do it on a daily basis. So they started having it on the mill premises itself, and they would have these mill sirens saying that, okay, now you can go to the post office and send the money back. So this becomes an incredible part of the migrant story, that is remittances, right? And it's partly because of this separated migration, that is, the man is outside, the woman is back home, and there is this particular separation. And so Ratnagiri is being the classic district of this. All of us know Ratnagiri is famous for mangoes, right? Alfonso mangoes, everyone. In migration studies, it's famous for mangoes. Right? It's a classic sort of case, because between 1870 to 2011, I would say it's a world record. 1870 to 2011, every census, the sex ratio of Ratnagiri has not fallen below 1100 females to 1000 males. In India, sex ratios are usually 800, 900. We say missing women. Ratnagiri has had a phenomenon of missing men for more than 130 years. Okay, and I argue in the book there are more than 150 districts of India like this. It's not as extreme as Ratnagiri, but similar.
Another facet of migration that I found really fascinating in your book was the role of middlemen in sort of facilitating mass migration, especially those of indentured labor. Could you elaborate?
So contractor is very important to connect the person who wants to migrate or is forced to migrate between a place where there is some demand. So even today the contractor is a huge part of the migration system. But when a migration corridor is established, the contractor vanishes. Why? Because who becomes the contractor is the family person. So the minute you establish a connection in the city or in the destination, the next wave of migration is completely family based. So you go because your chacha is there or your father is there. So that becomes a thing. So in India we say today, the bulk of work related migration, we say semi-permanent, which means people like security guards and so on, they're spending 10 months away from home, they go back for 1 or 2 months and so on. But there is also a kind of migration in India which is very short term seasonal, which is 2 months, 3 months. that is completely contractor based. That, for sugarcane harvesting, variety of small agricultural operations. So that is even today completely contractor based. And I will argue that over time, if these migration corridors build, the contractor will reduce out there and the family will take over as the ultimate. Even the Ratnagiri to Bombay corridor started through contractors. Within a few years, contractor eliminated. So the contractor is an important character to start the process. It could be exploitative. It could not be also. But very quickly over time, when the connection corridor is established, this character is eliminated.
So coming to the partition of India, which led to a lot of involuntary migration, both along the western and eastern fronts, led to a flood of migrants in India. So could you tell us how India managed to accommodate these migrants, deal with, rehabilitate them, and what was the sort of demographic effects of these migrations?
Yeah, I think we don't realize how large these population flows have been. These are the largest human population transfer flows in human history. Right? And the way I put it is not one partition but three partitions. India has had three partitions. In 1937, the partition of Burma from British India. 1947, the partition of British India. And 1971, which is the partition of Pakistan. And all three partitions have had massive refugee crisis, population transfer. Let's start with the first one, which is Burma. Burma is separated. Why is Burma separated? They don't like the Indians. Right? Why? They don't like the Chettiars. The merchant migrations. Same way like the Maharashtrians opposed the Marwadis, the Burmese didn't like the Chettiars for making a lot of money. So, a lot of xenophobic reactions from native Burmese saying we don't want these Indians in, we don't want the mercantile, we don't even want the labor. There were race riots in Rangoon, variety of things that were happening. Because remember, Burma 100 years back was like the Gulf today. Right? Persian Gulf. So many Indians working in the Persian Gulf. 100 years back, that was Burma. And that's why you have this famous song, Mere Piya Gaya Rangoon and so on. Right? Now, Burma is divided from India, and then the Japanese attacked in 1942. And you have 500,000 Indians who are trekking through Burma to come to India. Right? And it's interesting because we often think of partition 1947 as the first big bang. But 5 years before partition, we already had a refugee crisis staring at us. And so you have people like Nehru who are going, not setting up, but helping the relief work in eastern side, Eastern Bengal. You have Marwadi relief associations helping the refugees coming to India. You have Burmese refugee colonies starting to spring about all over India. And this is, we're talking of 1940s, even before 1947. So that's, we say, first big crisis. And the replication of that is still dated, because this Rohingya thing is just coming from that. Right? It's the same, it's a population which has migrated well in the past, which is now being persecuted, and they're sort of moving back. Then you're 1947, and we are saying about 15 to 17 million people being displaced within few months. It's unprecedented. It was also unplanned. This whole debate on partition, nobody actually gave an opinion on the logistics. How are you going to do this? Because I think the assumption was that people will stay. We'll do this division, but people will stay. And that didn't happen. Lot of bloodshed. I think it should be seen as a horrendous disaster in terms of just the number of lives lost. Those effects we still see today. And in 1971, which is again, not many people understand the scale, that is the world's largest refugee crisis till date. Even the Syrian refugee crisis is much smaller. 10 million Bangladeshis move into India in 8 months, 1971. India, of course, wins the war. Most of them go back. Right? But it kind of reorders the relationships between India and Bangladesh fundamentally, so that these migrations, which were historically happening towards Assam, towards Bengal, they resume. And so the way I look at it is, three big partitions of India have had a lot of involuntary displacement, and because we have not really found a solution at that time for all three of them, we have to face with those legacies even today.
Do you think in the near future that Bangladesh GDP per capita increases more than that of India, we'll see a sort of reverse migration happening?
That would be remarkable, but not completely out of possibility. Nobody would have thought in 1960s that the Middle East would be the world's fastest growing demographic region in the next 40 years. The population of countries in the Middle East have gone from something like 2 million to 40 million. if you look collectively, maybe not 2 to 40, but something like 10 to 40. We're talking about four-fold expansion of a big region within a few decades. We're talking about population growth rate per annum of something like 5%. It's unprecedented, and it happens to migration. Right? Why? Because they got this mineral resource wild, they made a lot of money of it, and it's led to this huge boom in the Middle East. So the fact that high economic growth rates can pull in migrants is true. And so if Bangladesh can pull off a mini South Korea, a mini Japan, there is absolutely no reason to be shocked that in the next decade, Bangladesh is thinking about an NRC to keep out illegal immigrant Indians in Bangladesh.
And even in terms of looking at what places in India you see the highest migration, like we see it's mostly along the coasts and the Gangetic belt. So I want to ask, like, why is migration in the Deccan, which is part of where Nagpur is, why is it muted in the Deccan? What sort of social cultural reasons could be there?
Yeah. One is geography. Closer you're to the coast, you'll be more active in trade, international trade. So that's a simple explanation. I have a water-based explanation. It comes from this. Migration is heavily based on density. The more dense a population is, especially in rural areas, the more the pressure is to migrate. As simple as that. Right? For example, why is it that India's poorest state, which is Bihar, and India's richest state, which is Kerala, they have the same rates of out-migration? Right? I mean, you might be thinking poverty drives migration, but India's poorest and richest state have the same rate of out-migration. It's because rural densities in both those places are very high. Now, why is rural population density in those places very high? Because they have had continuous habitation for long periods of time. And continuous habitation has happened because they've had a fantastic, easy access to water. Right? So the west coast of India, on one side of the Western Ghats, has had this miracle thing called the southwest monsoon. You're just guaranteed water supply, which basically sustains some agriculture, sustains density. Gangetic Basin has supported enormous density throughout history because of that. So automatically the dense parts of India have a higher chance of out-migration. Now you combine that with a shock, like the British come and start recruitment practices in your district and you establish a migration corridor. And the Deccan has been locked out on all three counts. So not much water, hence historically low densities, and the British were not really that interested in terms of recruitment. So some of the first recruitment networks didn't start there.
It's really counterproductive because counterintuitive because one would think that where there is less water that would lead to some distress migration, but we see that where water is abundant, you see higher
more population, more density, more pressure.
Very interesting. And another thing that I wanted to talk to you in the current context is the rise of politics on the basis of nativism. Like you mentioned, if the 20th century was the battle between communism and capitalism, then the 21st century will be the battle between cosmopolitanism and nativism. So in that context, when we see states like Andhra Pradesh bringing out these laws for locals, reservation, the private sector will only have to reserve jobs for locals. Is there any statistics which can debunk this fear of migrants taking over locals' jobs?
Yeah, I have written a piece on this in the Mint. It's called, I forget the title, but it's basically saying the case against job quotas for locals. That's the title of the article. Virtually every political party in India today, virtually every state in India today has its on its manifesto. It's a very disturbing trend. So there's no one political party to blame. Everyone is doing this. That is, you come to power and if you want power, you say we want to reserve jobs for locals. Now it's a very nice thing to say because you're saying there's high employment, you're going to protect jobs and so on. Right? First thing to be said, it's anti-constitutional. You can't do this. Right? I mean, there's a particular sort of legislation in the constitutional framework which guarantees freedom to move, freedom to take up jobs in India. Right? I mean, there's some reserved parts of India, but most states are not part of that. So what state governments are doing is blatantly anti-constitutional in my view. But I would also say there's a lot of rhetoric. In most sectors, actually, interstate migration is not so much. So when you say 8%, it's a nice political gimmick because you're actually never meeting it's not a binding constraint. Most sectors are not hiring, 80% from outside and so on. In most sectors, more than 80% of the workforce does come from within. Right? So it's a very simple law to pass. Why? Because it conveys that you're doing something for the locals. Whereas in practice, you never have to enforce the law. right? So it's one of those really cool laws, and that is why everyone is lapping it up. But the signal is completely disastrous, wrong signal. And the more competitive we get at this kind of a crazy level, I think it's a really bad sort of trend, and it should not be happening.
Another thing I wanted to understand from you, in your opinion, is migration in India more of push migration or pull migration? Curious to know.
Yeah, I mean, in migration studies, we say it's like asking which side of the scissors is doing the cutting. Right? So you have a scissor, and is it the top or the bottom? It's both. There's always a push and there's always a pull. You can identify distress migration, times of drought. Vidarbha is a classic case. Every year, variation in rain intensity, some communities will start moving out. Short term, it doesn't lead to a sustained migration move in terms of corridor, but we would call that seasonal distress, linked migration. Now with climatic change, that is also on the rise. Okay. But if you ask me, the bulk of work-related migration in India is for the simple reason that people want better opportunities, and it should be welcomed. I mean, people see migration as a problem. No society in the world, whether it's US, Western European countries, Japan, South Korea, has developed without this fundamental migration from farms to cities.
And now coming to the topic which I'm sure is on the minds of everybody. Given this whole furor around NRC and so on, what is the reality? Could you please give us some statistics which put this whole thing in context, this whole fear mongering that has happened?
Yeah, so one thing is, it's very interesting that illegal immigration, which was never part of our political discourse at an all India level, illegal immigration was always a huge thing in the Northeast, West Bengal and so on, is today now somehow become, almost India's #1 problem at an all India level. So there's illegal immigration in Bangalore, there's illegal immigration in Raichur, Ubhaykar and so on. So what can we as researchers say? One is, apart from literally 10 or 15 bordering districts of India, which means districts which have an international border, there is virtually no immigration in India, right? Which means census-wise, the numbers, over 500 districts of India, the immigration rate is less than 0.5%. So it's a virtually negligible number. To give you an example, in Europe, the immigration rate is 10 to 15%. In Britain, the number is 10 to 15%. In Australia, Canada, it's slightly more, 20+%. In India, the all India immigration rate is about 0.5%. 0.5. Right? Is illegal immigration a big issue? At an all India level, definitely not. Right? So the first thing is not to make this an all India issue. Right? It is a very localized issue. Out there, you want to see how much of it is destroying local culture, local ways. If at all it is, there's a huge question mark on that as well. And so my brief thing is, what was an issue which was mainly a northeast related issue, which is also declining because the immigration numbers clearly show a fall in the immigration rates of those same districts. For the simple reason that Bangladesh is progressing. This image that people are waiting at the Bangladesh border, desperate to run into India at any time. They've established networks now in the Gulf, Persian Gulf, like the Indians. They've established networks in Europe. If you go to Italy, you'll see Bangladeshis, in Rome, for example. So they have also diversified their immigration profile as they have become richer. So that the need or the intensity to come to India also reduced tremendously. So the pressure of this immigration is not very big at the all India level, and it is falling. And so I don't think it should be the top political sort of discussion point in India right now.
Okay, last question before I throw it to the audience. So, what I want to understand is, given the large levels of migration in India, as you so beautifully illustrated in the book, what sort of policy decisions can we take to improve the lives of our migrant workers who toil hard for the economy of our country? What sort of policy changes should we?
That's an excellent question. I was part of a government-based committee, so there is now for the first time a policy draft called, the policy directions on internal migration in particular. So, short answer is go Google up this PDF and see all the points there. And this came out just a couple of years back. The fundamental constraint migrant workers face, especially when they cross state boundaries, is lack of identity, right? Which means the minute you come from, say from Maharashtra to Gujarat, mean, that's a big migration corridor from northern Maharashtra, people working in Ahmedabad, Surat, and so on. You cannot access facilities the minute you're an interstate migrant in India. Why? Because most services in India are based on your ration card. Right? And the minute you cross state boundaries, your ration card is useless. So what we say in migration circles today is, this easy portability of social security benefits. That is the number one issue on migration policy, internal migration policy. That is, how do you make every Indian access any service anywhere in India, right? At pretty much the same. Now, there are fiscal issues here. Why should the Gujarat government be paying for social security benefits of guys who are pretty much going to be staying in now? So there has to be an interstate mechanism. And that's happening. So you've seen, for example, MOU signed between government of Odisha and Telangana, or government of Odisha and Tamil Nadu. So you have, important mechanisms in which sort of the needs of migrant workers are being addressed, but it needs very creative or dynamic policymakers on the ground who firstly don't see migration as a problem. That's a huge part. Most people see migration as a problem. Do not see migration as a problem, and start now thinking about how does one make migration a safe process and enable greater returns of the migration process for the migrants themselves. So portability of benefits is, I would say, the number one issue which can be easily done. Then there are many things in terms of housing, basic housing, but I think that's not about migrants, right? All of us would also like, better labor rights, better housing rights. So those are not migrant-specific issues. The main migrant-specific issues are portability.
So we recently saw One Nation, One Ration card being launched. So is there any record of how it's functioning on the ground level?
It's too early to sort of say. But what we do know is, in India, most migration happens within state boundaries, and precisely because of this. So hopefully this will change it. So more people will be tempted to go, across the border, even if you're in a district which is bordering another state. Typically, right now, only women are moving because of marriage. But for work, can that movement also start? You'll have a better allocation of, labor movement, and you'll be able to meet demand-supply requirements much better. So hopefully this, this actually works. That's the hope.
Thank you so much, Chinmay. It was really an enlightening session, and I now invite the audience to ask any questions.
So they have sporadically attacked migrants. There has been no systematic movement to push out the migrants, like there has been in Assam. So why such things happen?
Good question. Yes, in Gujarat, a lot of migrants in Gujarat as well. One quick answer is states which the people themselves are more migratory, right, are more empathetic to migrant concerns. So you're not going to see anti-migrant sentiments in Kerala. Right? And there are 2 million North Indians working in Kerala today, because now the Keralites have become rich from the Gulf. So there's a new migration dynamic there. But so far you're not seeing anti-migrant, because they know that they are at the receiving end in the Gulf. Right? You're not going to see anti-migrant sentiments so much as Punjab, which has huge migrant labour coming from other places. Why? Punjabis all over the world. Right? The last person to complain against migration should be the Punjabis, the Gujaratis, the Malayalis, for example. Now the Maharashtrians, on a relative sense, it's not that the Maharashtrians don't move, also go to the US in large numbers and so on. But on the relative sense has been less migratory. Again, not Ratnagiri and so on, but overall. And a lot of this has been politically motivated from, I would say, a particular set of conditions which are there in the 50s and 60s and so on. The specific question about, Assam history has to be seen in a very specific light, right? That is, Assam, unlike Maharashtra, apart from Mumbai, which has seen a large migration, Maharashtra as a state has not seen a massive demographic overturn. In Assam, what we've seen from 1850 to 1940, I'm talking before independence, is a complete demographic somersault, right, where the native Assamese speakers have gone from majority to minority. I'm talking before partition, before independence. Right. The problems in Assam start before independence, when the British imposed Bengali as a language of the province, when most of them spoke Assamese out there. So that angst is deep. It predates our politicians. It starts from the angst against the British for imposing Bengali against Assamese. It's a language-based issue predominantly, and as a result of it, it's a very complex political history of Assam. You need to understand that as to where that angst is. So broadly, where the demographic upturn has been much higher. Right? Arguably, you can say the angst or the sort of pushback has also been that much. Maharashtra, the demographic upturn has been negligible. Even in Mumbai, people say, oh, so many North Indians, people from UP, Bihar. In percentage point terms, it's 3 or 5 percentage points. It's not much. In Assam, we're talking literally 30, 40 percentage points, right, on particular identities. So that is why this sort of much more pushback has happened in Assam. And of course, the state has responded by giving a lot of concessions. That has been Indian government's standard strategy, is to kind of negotiate with concerns. That is how we have all these protected reserved areas across most of our borders.
Hello, Chinmay. In their manifestos about the job assurance to the local. My question is specific to Vidhar and Nagpur specifically. As you said, migration is not bad, but here in Nagpur we are facing in Vidhar the problem of migration of youngsters. Due to opportunities, due to lack of education institutes in Nagpur, our youngsters are migrating to western part, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and mostly to Pune. So here, some of the towns, some of the localities have become senior citizens' homes because the youngsters, their family members have moved out. And as you said, why job assurance? I'll tell you, out of 6 divisions in Maharashtra, out of the 100 jobs which Maharashtra government or public sector they provide, semi-government, 52% job goes to students from people from Pune division, and it will surprise you, only 2.53% jobs comes to Nagpur division. So job assurance to the local is also a part of, it's very important to hold the local here, and like as you said, the migration is not good. So
how question?
Yeah, how we can have this reverse immigration? How we can bring the locals back?
Yeah, I mean, this is printed. I mean, 60s, 70s, this was the huge rallying cry in India. If you look at newspaper headlines in the Times of India, 1970s, people studying at IITs going outside. How dare they? Today we don't. Why? First, people realize that even though people go outside, they maintain links. Right? They maintain links with back home, either by visits, by money, or by providing skills, or by actually activating reverse transfers by starting a portion here. So, should we criticize the people who have gone outside India? I say no, absolutely not. India gets $70 billion worth remittances from outside. That's a huge number. India's IT sector boom, the one sector which has put India on the world map, could not have happened without Indians who went to US in the 60s and 70s. They came back and set it up. So it is how does you as a region strategically engage with your migrants, and instead of seeing it as a problem, basically harness those skills for your own development. That is smart migration sort of strength. Instead of basically, thinking that how do I do stuff, how do I make things in a particular place so that nobody has to move outside. That's a classic motive. And everyone is thinking that at every spatial scale. How does a village develop so that nobody has to leave the village? How does the city develop so that nobody has to state, division, and then finally the country. But the fact is that economic opportunity will always be localized at particular sectors, different sectors. For example, software industry in India is very big in a few sectors, right? Instead of sort of aspiring for equal opportunity of virtually every sector everywhere, the best a region can do is specialize on some sectors, enable people to go outside and ensure that you maintain a link with those people so that you can develop those other sectors which you don't have. So what I'm trying to say is that if you go down this route of excessive job protectionism, right, you not only end up not creating any jobs, you will also end up in a situation where more people leave. Right? And so this whole thing of brain drain very quickly went to this thing that a brain drain is better than having a brain in a drain. Right? So it's better if people leave and give back later on. So that's how my thinking has sort of it's from a political point of view. Obviously, at every point of time, we're going to try and have a policy so that there is no reason for people to leave, right? But across India, across the world, what you're finding is that people leave also because of aspirations, just a chance to see the world. And what's interesting in India is people also come back, right? People go work for some time and also come back. So if you look at Punjab, Green Revolution, you will say that was the best thing to happen in agriculture in the 60s and 70s. You You would think if Vidarbha farmers, we talk about distress and so on, you would think that this would be imagine a green revolution in Vidarbha on that scale, right? You would think that would stop migration. No, out-migration from Bihar increased in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Why? Because as people became rich, they had even higher aspirations. They started going to Canada, right? So in Guntur, coastal Andhra, very rich fertile tracts, agricultural prosperity, people moved to Guntur, the main town, then Hyderabad, and now US. Right? So we are seeing that as actually states are getting richer, it's not that their migration is falling, they are moving at a different quality, different scale. It's how those regions engage with those migrants that enable higher sort of prosperity. I'll end, it's a slightly longish answer, but it's a very important point that you raised. Udupi. Udupi is a remittance economy. You might think that's a basket case. Why should anybody, an economy which runs with remittances? But every generation of migrants has been sending out has been of a slightly better quality. That is in terms of education and so on. Today, Udupi after Bangalore is ranked second on the human development indicators of Karnataka. Now you would ask, how is it that a district where everyone seems to be moving out is doing so well on virtually every indicator? It's because migration, when not seen as a problem, but as an opportunity, can lead to unique solution.
I would request you to please keep your questions brief. The gentleman in the back.
Chinmay, you talked about I want to be doing mandatory and all. Can't it become a simple solution?
Sorry, I didn't know the question. So
Aadhaar. Yeah, so Aadhaar actually becomes a unique identity for every citizen of the country. So can't that become a solution to the problem that the migrants primarily face?
That was the whole hope. In fact, in 10 years, that promise has not materialized in its fullest sense. There are some teething issues with this. One is in terms of, you can have Aadhaar, but who's going to pay the cost of that subsidized grain, for example? Right? So unless you have the fiscal relationship worked out, the state government can still say that okay, you have Aadhaar, but we'll give it only to our domicile residents. Right? So Aadhaar so now when we are saying one nation, one ration card, Aadhaar becomes a potential enabler. But I'll also tell you an interesting side story of how Aadhaar also, in an unintended way, leads to more unwanted migration. There's some places in India where you have, there's a family of 4 or 5 different people have ration cards, so you get ration based on per person basis. Now, typically with ration card, you just go and say, okay, for my wife, this much, for me, so much, and so on. Now you need a fingerprint. So if I'm not there at home, right, I can't access my quantity. Now, I'm a migrant, I'm in Bangalore, and my home is in Anantapur. I am now making an additional trip from Bangalore to Anantapur to press, really get the grade, and then move back to Bangalore. So this is a very weird way in which new problems emerge, which were not even conceived earlier.
I think last question of it was maybe.
People who are migrating. What about the next generation? Like my parents moved out of the northeast like 16 years ago. I was like 6. So about the culture, I have learned different cultures of different states. So do you think it's a beginning of dissolving of culture? Because I'm not I don't know completely about what is there in Assam, the complete authentic things. But I have a little bit information about Assam, Gujarat, Ahmedabad, where I have stayed over the years. So do you think it's the beginning of some dissolving of cultures, like that authenticity of every culture is going to dissolve over time, not a smaller period?
Dissolve or enrich might be interesting. If your question is this a trend? It's tough to say. Migration has been happening for a long time, in India. But there's a whole chapter in the book called diaspora, right? And so, for example, you belong to this particular diaspora of people who moved out from there. Diaspora is usually a word used for Indians outside India, but it can also be used, for example, Maharashtrian diaspora. That is, Marathi-speaking people outside Maharashtra. So you have these Marathi mandals in Ahmedabad and where I am currently, variety of places outside. Association is a very powerful way to maintain cultures, right? And so in the US, you have these, Marathi-speaking mandals. I was in St. Louis for some time. There was a Gujarati Samaj there. Used to dance Darbar and so on out there. Even if you're non-Gujarati, you're forced to do that. Because Gujarati Samaj is very strong. Thailand today has a Gujarati Marwadi Samaj, very rare. You have Gujarati Samaj and Marwadi Samaj. But in Thailand, you have Gujarati Marwadi Samaj combined. And so associations play a very important role in keeping the lifeblood of that particular culture alive. And that's a huge part of how Indian culture is kept alive, is through thousands and thousands and thousands of caste or community or language-based associations.
Chinmay, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but we've run out of time.
Thank you, Chinmay, for that wonderful talk. Thank you to the audience for this engaged audience. Please buy this book. It's amazing. I can totally vouch for it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We also have an exclusively painted painting. We also have an exclusively painted painting.